Hi everyone. Michel Foucault is one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. His work is required reading in universities and regularly cited by scholars. However, Foucault is hard to understand. But did you know there is an essay from 1982 in which Foucault tries to make his ideas, his whole project, clear? This essay is called Subject and Power, and I'm going to summarize it for you here. Now, as always, when we're talking about Foucault, just stay with me. His work can be complicated, but by the end of this video, I think you'll understand Foucault much better than you do now. Now, the first thing Foucault says in this essay might surprise you. He says that despite the fact he's always writing about power, power is not actually the subject of his research.
You sure about that?
The real focus of his work, Foucault says, is the subject. The subject of his research is the subject, or more precisely, a history of the different modes by which, in our culture, human beings are made subjects. So, what does this mean? A subject is just a philosophical term for a person. It's really just a way of saying that people, like you and me, are beings who act and perceive in the world. It's a term that we can use to differentiate people like you and me, for subjects, from objects, like this Snorlax Squishmallow. I am a subject who perceives and acts upon things in the world, and Snorlax is just an object. It's adorable though. So that distinction is probably clear enough, but why does Foucault say he's interested in the modes by which human beings are made subjects? Aren't we just born subjects? Well, not exactly. You are a human. That's kind of a biological definition of what you are. You're like a mammal or a primate. But think about this. As a human, you are taught how to be human all the time. You receive lessons and instructions from schools, from governments, from the media. All of the time, you are being told how to be and how to act, how to think, and how to perceive the world. Think about how schools and psychologists and therapists want to teach you how to be a healthy and productive member of society. So one way of understanding Foucault's project, really simply, is that he is interested in the disciplines and institutions that teach us how to be a human. Now, Foucault believed in order to understand the ways we are shaped as subjects, we do need to talk about power. Power does shape us, but Foucault argued that most of the theories we have about power are inadequate. When we talk about power, we mostly talk about politics. We talk about who's in charge of the government, or we talk about money. We talk about economics, the rich. And this is pretty straightforward. It's not just laws that make people the way they are. And it's not even just class status, as Marxist thinkers tend to believe. Power is more than just government, and corporations have power too, but power also operates in churches. The media has power over us. There are countless ways that we find ourselves subject to power's influence in our day-to-day lives. So we need a way of studying power that is about more than just understanding law or following the money. Foucault thought we needed to study power in all of its many varied forms. But then a new problem emerges because power becomes so big, it's impossible to wrap our brains around it. Now, Foucault thought up a pretty ingenious strategy to address this problem. It's really the crux of his whole project. This is the research technique that Foucault is best known for. Foucault thought we could understand power more clearly if we focused on specific sites where power is operating. So he looks at these specific sites where we can see power and resistance to power, where we can see struggle and therefore how power is operating, the strategies and techniques it's using. These spaces, Foucault argues, are the zones where power's techniques become most visible. Now, there are three different kinds of struggle that Foucault identifies in this essay. The first is struggle against domination. So this is conflict between, he says, social or religious or ethnic groups where one group is trying to dominate or control another. The next is struggle against exploitation. This is the class conflict between the wealthy who would exploit the working class and then the workers who resist through unions or collective action. Again, this is the kind of struggle that Marxist thinkers are most interested in. But it's the third type of struggle that Foucault is especially focused on. He calls it the struggle against subjection. What Foucault is interested in are the ways that we are pressured and encouraged to adopt particular subject positions. How are we made, or how are we enticed to adopt these different identities or roles within society? Sometimes these roles and positions are imposed upon us, and other times we are incentivized to adopt them. I think the way that power operates in terms of like the struggle with domination and exploitation, this is fairly clear to us, right? It's fairly intuitive. We understand how we can be compelled through force or the threat of poverty to adopt certain positions or roles within society that we otherwise would not choose. That's very intuitive and clear. This third mode of power, this idea of subjection, this is arguably much more complicated, but Foucault argues this is the central site of struggle in modern life. And nowadays, the struggle against the forms of subjection, against the submission of subjectivity, is becoming more and more important, even though the struggles against forms of exploitation have not disappeared. Now, later in this essay, Foucault actually gives us a definition of power. But first, he's going to explain that power does not exist. So let me explain what he means. Basically, Foucault is saying, if we begin our investigation of power by asking, what is power, we will fail. We make a mistake when we think that power is this thing, this capacity that is possessed either by certain people who are in charge of particular institutions, or if we think that power is possessed by the people, that within collective action, the people have power. In that sense, Foucault argues power does not exist. When we're talking and thinking about power, Foucault says we can really only talk and think about power relations. Foucault seems to say that power only really exists in practice. We can only see it when we see multiple subjects interacting with each other. And he defines power as actions brought to bear on other actions, or actions modifying other actions. So certain subjects take action in order to modify the actions of other people. That's Foucault's definition of power. And every society is made up of power relations. Countless subjects acting to modify the actions of others and resisting the impositions of other subjects. He goes on to say that the analysis of power relations within a society cannot be reduced to the study of a series of institutions, because power relations are rooted in the system of social networks. But let me offer you a critique of Foucault. One criticism we might make is that while Foucault here is saying that we shouldn't focus on institutions alone, and we need to be aware of these power relations, the way power is flowing through a social network of all these different subjects, is that really what Foucault is doing? He spends a lot of time talking about institutions. One could say that Foucault is hardly turning our attention away from the power of institutions. All he's doing is moving a little bit lower down the ladder. He's focused on those institutions that have a more immediate impact on our day-to-day lives. And while we're on the subject of critiquing Foucault, maybe we should talk about why, despite all his influence, Foucault's work still remains unconvincing to a lot of people. As much as Foucault's idea of this power that kind of circulates and moves through society is provocative, and I think in a lot of ways persuasive, it doesn't always feel true. Like, maybe power is fluid, but our felt experience is often that power is concentrated and like calcified. Like for most of us, it feels as if certain groups or certain institutions have a lot of power, and that power does not get diffused or moved or redistributed to other people in the ways that really matter to us and matter in our lives. It does feel like power is concentrated in particular institutions, concentrated with particular groups, and that they exert their power on the rest of us. And even though here Foucault says he's skeptical of the idea that people, like by nature, have some power when they act collectively, I think our felt experience and history has taught us that, well, maybe they kind of do. It does seem that when people act collectively, they are able to exert a tremendous amount of power and accomplish their goals. And more than that, it seems as if that collective power is a kind of permanent resource that we can always draw upon if we want to. All this is to say that Foucault's very good at describing how power operates and how power moves. I'm just not sure I'm persuaded he knows what power is. Now, Foucault has a response to this criticism in this essay. If for the time being I grant a certain privileged position to the question of how, it is not because I would wish to eliminate the questions of what and why. Basically, I think Foucault argues that any grand claims we want to make about power are probably just premature. We make a lot of grand claims about power and what it is without really understanding it. And so maybe we can understand Foucault's work as a kind of pathway to these other bigger questions about power that we really want answers to. And Foucault's focus on the how is very helpful. For example, have you ever encountered his idea of the Panopticon? It's perhaps his most influential idea and maybe the best example of how Foucault thinks about power. If you'd like to learn more about that, you should check out this video over here. And if you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon page. I hope to see you over there, and I'll talk to you soon.